And before we're joined by our next guest, I want to consider how a real democracy actually handles gun issues and changes to gun laws. Consider what Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau had to say about guns in Canada. Listen to this.
2 years ago, our government banned 1,500 models of assault-style weapons, including the Ruger Mini-14 used at Polytechnique and the AR-15. We also expanded background checks to keep firearms out of the wrong hands. We did it because it was what responsible leadership required us to do. And now, as we see gun violence continue to rise, it is our duty to keep taking action. So today, we're moving forward. We're introducing legislation to implement a national freeze on handgun ownership. What this means is that it will no longer be possible to buy, sell, transfer, or import handguns anywhere in Canada. In other words, we're capping the market for handguns.
That was the Canadian Prime Minister today. Yesterday, our next guest, David Hogg, spoke at the rally outside the NRA convention in Houston.
We now have the most pro-gun violence prevention Senate, House, and White House ever in American history. But that's not enough. That's not enough. We have to hold them accountable and get through the filibuster. We need to go out there and demand that they act. I need every single person that's watching this, either at home or listening to me right now, to show up at your senator's office over this recess every single day that you can. Show up and demand that they have a vote with background checks and red flag laws.
And joining us now is David Hogg, co-founder of March for Our Lives. He is a survivor of the school massacre at the Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. David, thank you very much for joining us. And I wanted to juxtapose what we just heard the Canadian Prime Minister say with what you said. Because if you were making the same kind of speech in Canada, you would not have been talking about a filibuster rule, and you would not be talking about a Senate with 2 senators per state creating a fundamentally anti-democratic, non-democratic structure in the federal government that makes it non-responsive to democracy the way the Canadian democracy-based government is responsive to democracy.
I wouldn't be. And frankly, Lawrence, all I have to say is that I wouldn't be speaking there, not just because of that, but because the shooting at my high school wouldn't have happened if I went to school in Canada.
So as you were going to the NRA, was that, by the way, was that your first NRA convention that you went to protest this weekend?
I think so, but it definitely was not my first time in Houston. And you know what was remarkable about that? You know, I just heard the last guest speak, is A, how many new people were there? Absolutely incredible. And B, I believe that there were more people outside at the counter-protest than there actually were inside at the NRA, where the former president, mind you, was speaking. I think when the counter-protest is bigger than the organization that has an arena of almost 4,000 people, if I remember correctly, and they can only get a couple hundred, and they have the former president, we know that things are going to change.
David, you went to work as a high school student after your high school was attacked and so many of your friends and classmates were killed. You went to work in the Florida legislature in your state where it happened. Now you're going to work again, trying to get more momentum again. Where are you going to be aiming your legislative impact for your future lobbying on this?
Yeah, well, Lawrence, I have a call to action for all Americans that are watching this. This movement is not about being a Democrat or Republican. These kids that are dying are not Democrats or Republicans. They're our future. We need to come together as a country like we did in the wake of Parkland in Florida with, mind you, our deeply Republican state legislature, with Governor Rick Scott at the time, and work together to pass any form of gun legislation, because what I can respect the fact that people don't agree with me. What I can't accept, though, is that we can't do anything to stop these shootings, because the truth of the matter is, Lawrence, right now, the next shooter is out there plotting his attack. It's not. We know these things are going to continue until we act. And the reality is, as well, there was a good guy with a gun at my high school. I believe there were 19 good guys with guns in Texas, and both of them failed to do anything. They failed in Parkland, and they failed again in Texas. How many times are we going to hear this talking point again and again that risks the lives of our first responders, our teachers, and our students? Lawrence, if our first line of defense is first responders need to be our last resort and not our first. If our only response to this is once a shooter gets on campus, we are failing, because a student, a teacher, or a first responder is already going to likely die. We need to respond to these things before they happen in the first place, because we've seen the cost of what happens when we don't. The reality is, too, Lawrence, finally, that these shooters wait until they're old enough to legally obtain these guns. They were 18 years old. They were 19 years old at my school. They don't have black market connections. This idea that they have deep connections to the black market is ridiculous. These are barely adults. These are essentially very, very young adults that are 18 and 19 years old that are getting a hold of an AR-15 legally and then shooting up a high school. There's no reason they need to have access to that, and that's why I'm calling on all Americans to join me in marching with tens of thousands of others in over 350 marches across the country, not as Democrats or Republicans, but as Americans demanding action to keep our kids safer and focusing on what we can agree on, to march in your city, wherever you are, on June 11th with us for the start of a movement, not the end of one, but the start of one, to make our kids safer. And if you'd like to join me in that, you can text MARCH to 954-954. Once again, that's MARCH to 954-954.
That is Saturday, June 11th. And David, I'd ask you, can you join us on The Last Word the night before, on June 10th, on Friday, June 10th, before that march?
We'll talk to our press team. But the other thing that I'd like to say is the last thing, Lawrence, is we are showing up at senators' offices, too, right now. Mitch McConnell is waiting for us. He is waiting for us to move on from this. 19 kids died and 2 teachers. We can't wait for the next Sandy Hook. We are showing up. I'm going to Senator Toomey's office in Pennsylvania tomorrow. I need educators, teachers, everyone with me, gun owners, Republicans, everybody who agrees that we need action to show up with me in Pittsburgh. And if you want information on that, go to my Twitter. I'm at DavidHogg111.